We're back. It's K&M Geekly. This week we're talking about The Mission on Hulu, Teeth Off-Broadway, and Starblazers $21.99. And now your host, Mike and Deglio.
What is up, team? Welcome back. Sorry, Keith, deal with it. To K&M Geekly. Just a sneak peek at some geeks talking about some of the things getting them through their weeks. It's been 1 month. Keith thought it would just die. But you, the K&M regulars, you, the listener of K&M Geekly, you let it be known that we're not screaming into the void. You missed the show.
I tried so hard to cancel this show.
You did. Keith tried to cancel my one baby. And here's the thing. The YouTube and the analytics, everything is crazy, right? I don't understand a lick of it. But there is truth to these few things. There's no monetization anymore. You don't know what's going to hit. I'm going to have Nick talk about that in just a second. And you're not supposed to cross the streams. We should have learned that in Ghostbusters. So we are launching this first episode on our newest satellite channel, youtube.com/@KNMGeekly. This will be separate from the mothership, which you can find the links to below. You're already a member, but maybe you're not. You're finding us from another reason. You can join our main channel. We talk about all things Trek and toys. You can find that there. This will be, Keith, you know that drawer in your house? The catch-all drawer? We've all got one. Where you just throw the junk? That's this channel, baby. And you're subscribed.
We're the junk.
We got this show, maybe some gaming stuff. When I have a whim or somebody has a whim and we don't want to put it on the main channel because it's not Trek adjacent, it's coming here to K&M Geekly. Keith, talk for a second about what any of that means because I don't actually know. I'm just saying the words.
I mean, I think you described it well. So if you are here from the mothership, please give this channel a subscribe as well. That way you will get notifications when we do a new episode. Because otherwise, you're not going to know when we drop a new episode of our grab bag of nonsense Mike wants to talk about. It's going to be great.
And I like to stream game stuff. My brother and I, which I'm going to introduce in just a second, we do 4-hour live streams of press conferences, and Keith doesn't want to be involved in all of that.
I don't want to do that, no.
And I also promised him he didn't have to come to Geekly every week, and because of that, folks, I'm welcoming, as the permanent third chair of the K&M Geekly podcast, the Joan Rivers, my Mario to my Luigi, the other Super Indeglio brother, Dr. Nick Indeglio. Welcome to K&M Geekly officially. Would you like to, are you ashamed or proud? How are you feeling?
You should be.
Well, it's kind of like when, one of the announcers on Monday Night Raw gets replaced. They bring someone in who lasts a couple days and then he's gone. So happy to be here to do something that Keith doesn't want to do,
Hey, sloppy seconds are seconds nonetheless. It's still
a
sloppy
seconds.
Like JR just quit. I don't know what happened.
Walked out the door.
So, we're going to talk about random stuff. We're going to get back into the stuff everybody loves on the podcast, just our random stuff we've been watching. I am going to try to get a topic every week for us to discuss. But first, I want to start with Nick. I want to let you brag a little bit because I'm involved. We've talked on this channel often, those who've listened before, about just like random projects we do. One's going to come up that I've been working on when Nick talks about Starblazers because I built a home server, which I've never done before. But, Nick, you've been working on a project secretly as the principal of a middle school. I got to see it in action. I want to just give you a moment to talk about it because for some reason, this is the thing that middle-aged men do with their lives.
I'm assuming you're talking about the Iron God's Gym.
I am.
Hidden in the bowels of our middle school. And now I'm hoping that no one watches this show because I never want to get fired.
Oh, I can promise you that.
Oh, don't worry. You are safe, sir.
From my day job. Well, I had started constructing a home gym in my garage with years of equipment that I've amassed from the mid-90s until now. So 30 plus years of equipment collection and whatnot. But my wonderful wife, Danielle, is also a hoarder of sorts, and our garage is always chock full of weird tchotchke things from different places, holidays, etc. And every time I want to use the bench or the power rack or anything else, it's covered with plants, fake plants usually, clothes. I mean, you name it, it's pretty much covered. And I finally gave up, and life was over. The game was over. I'm just going to give up on fitness, forget forever. I'm just going to be fat, and that's it. Game's done. But then during Christmas break,
I know that song.
Yeah,
it's a great song. I've been dancing to that for about a decade.
So, to make a long story a little bit shorter, our fitness room at school and our gym were recently renovated. Our school is about 25 years old, and they're doing some renovations. And they're trying to make our fitness area like a CrossFit box, something that kids, when they go into the high school and college and whatnot, enjoy going to. So, very popular right now, those types of gyms. Well, I've also amassed some equipment over the years in our school gym as well. And all of that was going to have to go away. So I've got all this equipment in the garage. We've got all this equipment in the gym, at school, and nowhere for any of it to go. And then it dawned on me that we have a hidden third floor of the building where the boilers and the chillers are located, a place no one ever goes. The places you always wondered about in your middle school or high school. Does it exist? Is there a basement or an attic or access to the roof? Well, there is. And over the course of the past 2 months, me and my head custodian, Pat, and a few of the other iron gods, the guys at the school who like to lift weights and things, we have moved all of that equipment to the attic of the school, the roof access right next to the boilers and the chillers, and we have created what we call the Iron Gods Gym. So pretty much,
I'm writing down where the makeout spot is at the school now.
Interestingly, well, we talked about that as well, and I think Mike's going to touch on that piece in just a second, probably. So anyway, we've got all the equipment up there, which is great. The only thing we really couldn't get up there was cardio equipment. And Pat, my head of facilities, actually had an idea. He was going to try to rent the district bucket truck, and we were going to load up a couple treadmills and whatnot onto the bucket truck and lift it 3 stories in the air and unload it onto the roof of the building to carry it into this new
this
location.
Is all great news.
Yeah,
I know. We've given up on that at least until summertime when there's less people around. But anyway, so Mike and I have started using the gym, as have the other some of the other guys who are really interested in that type of, like working out and weightlifting. And Mike's come up with some ideas too that are completely ridiculous and totally purposeless to include.
I mean,
so Mike, if you want to jump in.
As a 40-year-old going to a middle school to work out?
Yeah, I don't even have a key. So I can only go on days where Nick can let me in. After the kids have all left, because I can't be... Anyway, so yeah, I want to run some networking up there so we can project from my home server all of the workout videos onto the wall or screen. Also, we've discussed some closed security cameras to keep... we're discussing the legality of it.
Wow. You know when I said I didn't want to be here at the beginning? Now I really don't want to be here.
And my point is, folks, write in with your weird projects. I'll save you the story. We'll talk about it another episode where I built a home server to serve movies to no one but my friends and family that I've acquired legally. And, I've ripped all my backups of my stuff. Anyway, point being, I want to hear in the comments, what are your pet projects, right? We know we've met on our other channel a lot of action figure customizers, but like, what are the stupid things you're working on that just have no basis in your career or life, and you're just doing it for you? Or maybe you're building a hot rod in the garage, or maybe you, like Keith and I, just have a box of wires for old peripherals that we're not using.
So many wires. I mean, I found my iPod video the other day, so
the hard drive still works.
I showed it on Deep Space Nine. Yeah.
I would still argue that projects that are purposeless really, though, are what give us purpose, because over the past couple months recovering from this hip surgery and, just the malaise of winter and stuff, if not for this ridiculous gym project, there wouldn't have been a whole lot to really be looking forward to. So it actually has done wonders for my mental health, I would say.
Yeah, and that's what keeps you going.
That's for damn sure. I mean, that is why geeks are geeks, is because it gives us something to be excited about.
Well, and starting from scratch has been a thing, and I'd hit just a dead end of working out, and then this gym thing popped up, and just as a lark, I went over to hang out with Nick, and it's like we started that routine again every Monday, and so it's helped jumpstart that. So let us know what your projects are in the comments. We'll talk more about all these things as they progress. But let us jump into the main show, folks. We want to talk about some of the things we've been playing, watching, or doing, or seeing, so that you can maybe jump in and learn something new, or have your opinions verified or vilified from what we think. Let's start with whatever I put for topic 1, and that is this week, Keith, you saw a new off-Broadway show that I passed up a ticket to, and now I'm punching
that was
myself
a mistake.
because this is the new hot thing. Tell us all about Teeth.
Yeah, boy, that was a mistake, sir. You are definitely going to regret that. So I went to go see Teeth at Playwrights Horizons, which is a musical based on the movie Teeth, about vagina dentata. If you don't know what that means, you'll find it out soon. It's written by my friend Anna Jacobs and Michael R. Jackson. Michael R. Jackson, who won the Pulitzer last year or the year before, and the Tony for Strange Loop. And it stars my sister-in-law, Elise. So I had to go and see that. And so it basically, the short version is it's a horror comedy musical about a super repressed girl who discovers that she has teeth down there and uses it to defend herself when necessary. And it's hard to describe. It's kind of it has a lot of overlap with the show like Little Shop of Horrors, where it sort of starts here and then ends 10,000 miles from where it began. And it's a type of thing that sounds on its face like it's going to be silly, like it's going to be a festival show. It's sort of like whatever. It's sort of stupid, right? Well, except for it's written by Pulitzer-winning, Tony-winning writers who are absolute. Anna and Michael are absolute geniuses, kind of certifiedly so. And so it is this crazy horror metaphor for for feminism and awakening. All sorts of things. I mean, it's like puberty, it's sexual awakening, it's the misogyny of the world, anyway. You'll get from it what you get from it, but it is so smart, and the score is so catchy. The lyrics are so smart. The performances are absolutely top notch, and obviously, I'm pretty partial to my sister-in-law Elise, who stars in the show and does a tour de force phenomenal job. But Stephen Pasquale is also, Jason Gauthier, like really first-class people. And it's an off-Broadway show at Playwrights Horizons, which is a really great nonprofit theater. So it's on a small stage in what you think is a small scale, and then I don't want to give anything away because the shock value of what you're going to see on that stage, and I don't just mean the obvious, right? The production level of this blew my mind to the point where I thought they had escalated as far as you could possibly go, and then went 3 more times past what I thought was even possible to see. They do things on that stage that I didn't think would be. I would have put money on. There's absolutely no way they would be allowed to do that. There's no way they had the budget for that. There's no way they could have done that. So not only is it an incredibly smart, hilarious, kind of upsetting at times show in a good way, right? Just the production values of it, like we will tell tales of this show. I don't know what's going to happen with it moving forward. I'm sure they'll get a cast album. I don't know if they're going to move it to a commercial production. I really hope that they do, because otherwise the people who did not get a chance to see this are going to hear stories of this show and going to be really sad they missed out. So anyway, First Class is directed by Sarah Benson and choreographed by Raja Feather Kelly. It's absolutely first class, tip top. It's Little Shop Part 2 ×2.
Sounds a little bit like the plot to Monster, also a little bit.
Well, I don't know what Monster is.
Monster won the Academy Award years ago. It was about the serial killer Eileen so-and-so.
Oh, Elaine Warnos? Oh, no. It's not quite like that.
Not dark-wise, but just like about, well, maybe not. Okay. I'm misreading.
Right, I mean, yes, it does have a little bit of that, but it's a comedy, right? It's an upsetting comedy, but it is not like this horrible, deep, dark tale of, I mean, it is, but it's much more akin to Little Shop than to
It's
Monster.
been cool to see there be, because recently I haven't had my finger on the pulse of the kind of what's happening in the theater world, but just through my sort of tangential feeds and whatnot, the buzz is buzzing, is a buzz, and that that's awesome.
I went with one of my friends who works at Sony, and the lights came up, and both of us literally turned to each other and said at the same time, "Holy sh!" together, like in sync, because like I think I said it out loud like 3 different times in the last 20 minutes of that show. And I knew it was coming. Some of it.
That's awesome. Wow. I can't wait to see it. Yeah, I hope I get a chance.
Definitely.
How long is it running?
Do not miss a chance. What's that?
How long is it running for off-Broadway?
It's running through, I think, April 14th. It's been extended. I don't know if they can't extend again because they have a season. So unless it transfers either to another commercial run or if it moves to Broadway, this is your shot. So April 14th is when it closes. So do not miss it if you have any chance to see it.
Okay, well that is Teeth. Congratulations, Elise, and everyone involved, of course. And now let's move on to topic 2. I
thought, actually, before you go, Mike, I thought Keith was going to be talking about getting Invisalign when I saw the subject. So I was really disconnected from the whole.
So much less interesting. Yes. This was much more exciting than Invisalign.
About the same budget, though, having personal experience. So let's go now and talk. I mentioned recently that I built this server, and my brother sent me on a mission to find the 3 seasons of the anime that aired in the late 70s through early 80s called Starblazers. I don't know if that's what we're talking about today, but I know that it was a yeoman's effort to find those in their complete status, because just the way they were filmed, had to be rebroadcast in America, dubbed, the whole 9. But it was a mission that I enjoyed taking on. Nick, talk about Starblazers. Talk about the versions you've been watching.
Well, I just want to basically give our fans out there, if they haven't checked out Starblazers, and I'm guessing a lot of them, because of the eclectic nature of the types of things we're all into, they probably have. So it actually originally debuted as space cruiser, space battleship Yamato back in Japan in the early 70s, and was one of the very few, if not only, Japanese animes that made it to the United States to become kind of like the space opera genre. So people specifically in my very, very narrow bracket, my age, I was, I think, 5 or 6 at the time when it really hit the mid-afternoon Channel 29, Channel 48 airwaves, which that time slot eventually was taken over by Transformers and G.I. Joe when Hasbro kind of came in. But it was something so different than what anyone had seen, and they were targeting the wrong audience. It's really more of a late teenagers, early 20s demographic, but they were looking for little kids, because you see the animation and you just assume, this is going to be like space fair, basically. But it wasn't that. It was something much different. What caught my attention as a kid about it was that the mission itself was 1 year. So across the 26 episodes, it's a quest where this group of ragtag, the last-ditch effort for Earth to survive bombardment by this alien race called the Gamelons, had to make it to a distant galaxy, retrieve an item, the MacGuffin, and then make it back to Earth in order to save it in time. So there was always a sense of urgency. What? Sorry, Keith?
So it's serialized.
Very much so.
Interesting.
But the episodes also tell individual stories. So as long as you kind of have an inkling of what's going on, you could pick up anywhere and kind of like catch on. They do recaps and summaries. So that whole first season, I was just mesmerized by. The second season, same characters, builds on the first season. And then the third season, which I barely remember, and in doing research after time, found out that it was, even in Japan, it was kind of critically panned. And there's a different characters, different story. It's set a few years later. Anyway, as I got older, or got a little bit older, in the mid-2000s, I was trying to find it. And it turns out that it was Funimation that brought it to the United States. So they did have VHS imports. Eventually, like some Blu-ray and DVDs were talked about. But in Japan, around 2013, they remade the entire series. And they called it Space Battleship Yamato 2199. When I say remade, I mean they remade it like the cartoon remake. I purchased it. And I'm actually watching the original series that Mike has put on Plex versus the 2013 reboot. And it's almost frame for frame. They did change a couple things. I think
so it's not just redubbed; it's reanimated.
Reanimated, yeah, and much more
contemporary.
Contemporary, I guess would be the best way to put it, but keeping the same story intact. So it's been pretty fun going on a YouTube dive, watching the comparisons between those two things. And then the last piece to kind of touch on there is that in Japan, they actually did do a live action movie in 2010, which was really good. I found it, I watched it, and was actually quite impressed by the budget, the special effects, and how true they stayed to the story. And once again, that kind of sense of urgency that played into it. So as a kid, it was more about, for me, I would draw the Argo, as it was called in the United States. It was the Yamato, if you were watching it anywhere else in the world. And the whole conceit of the technology was that the place they were trying to go was a planet called Iskandar. And Iskandar had the technology to reverse this radiation bombing. They called them planet bombs that were destroying the Earth. So they gave them technology for a wave motion engine, which could travel 148 million light years. But it also powered the wave motion cannon on the front of the ship, which turned out to be 10 times, 100 times, a million times stronger than a nuclear weapon. And the show gets into the morals and the ethics of when that weapon should be used, if it ever should be used, or if we should even be saving the Earth if we have to cause this much destruction to do it. So really good series.
So Oppenheimer is a remake of this.
Oppenheimer is essentially a remake. Yeah. But in a way, I mean, if you look at, because this was filmed in Japan, who had suffered the effects of the, the atomic bombings. And a lot of that is kind of what's referenced and shown. So it's really interesting that this Japanese show, which was, vestiges of World War II and things like that, and then comes to the United States, whole different perspective, because we're the ones who actually, bombed Japan and caused, all of what happened there. And then trying to turn the show into something that speaks universally, which I feel like they successfully did. So if you're really into kind of niche stuff and any Japanese anime at all, the original series followed by the rebooted cartoon series and then the live action movie, just a lot of fun to kind of go down that rabbit hole and revisit my childhood a little bit as well.
So there you have it.
Awesome.
Starblazers, check it out. Crunchyroll, I think, has some of them. You can find it on Amazon Prime. You can find all of the different versions. Do a little Googies and figure it out.
And you don't have much time. I'll just throw this out there. I found out Funimation and their streaming service, as of I think April 2nd, is done. So you're not going to be able to find any of the anime that you could have found there, which was some of the Starblazers.
Yeah, we're going to talk in a different episode about kind of where we're at with streaming, because there's a big purchase recently. Walmart bought Vizio. So a whole chunk of TVs are going to be produced by Walmart, what's the big deal? Well, ads in your TV OS and ads taking over everything, and whether me being crazy and wanting to build my own media server is actually that crazy, because having your own stuff is becoming less and less an option
remember we
these days.
threw out all of our CDs and DVDs and that kind of stuff? Well, maybe we moved a little too fast.
We shouldn't have done that, yeah. So
should have known.
A couple of quick things I want to touch on. Quickly, in one of our first episodes in Season 1 of K&M Geekly, I talked about the game Control. I never could quite finish it and the DLC, and what I did recently was revisit it because it's on Game Pass this month. It's come to Game Pass, so if you have Game Pass, you already have this game. Also, it's super cheap and discounted on PS4 and Xbox, so you can get this game for next to nothing. They're having a bunch of success with their new game, Alan Wake 2. I went back to Control and did the thing that my innards telling me still not to do, but I do it. I turned off damage, so I couldn't be hurt. And I'd made myself basically a god in the game just to plow through the combat so I could get to the story. Interestingly, the combat's still really satisfying, even though I know there's no like stakes. But it's still fun to know all the superpowers.
So basically, just like, oh, I'm going to go play football against 8-year-olds. I'm a god! This is so
different.
satisfying.
Football's supposed to be challenging, whereas in this game you are a god, ostensibly, so it's okay. I'm able to make the logic leap. Regardless, Remedy is so good at storytelling, and this isn't as scary as Alan Wake, so you can actually play it at night and not feel weird. And the DLCs are great, and I was able to get through the whole campaign plus the 2 DLCs in about less than 20 hours, so like a weekend, So if go play Control. The story is great. It's a great science fiction story about like altered elements and like lore we have in the real day. They kind of tie it into their story lore. It's really, really cool. I really enjoyed it.
It has a good story because I'm looking for a new game that has an investing story.
I played it only for the story, Keith. I found all the little bits of bobs of like lore because I wanted to read it, like all the files and stuff you find in the audio logs, and very much the way they use projection and live action in Remedy games is second to none. So Control is a super high recommend, especially if you have Game Pass, and I think it's also available, but with the DLC for less than $10.
I played through about 6 hours of it in the past, but obviously with the damage on, I did find the combat a little clunky, to be honest. However, the story was super engaging.
Once you unlock the other powers, it becomes much more fluid, the combat. And once you turn I just don't want to deal with it because I like the story that much. So I really just turned it all the way down to 0. No damage and like made myself super overpowered. So basically one hit everybody, but there's still enough of it that it breaks up the story a little bit. Anyway, Control. Double thumbs up. Okay.
Maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. I think you specifically, it's very sci-fi and horror. So not horror, more creepy, more David Lynch.
But here's the thing with games for me, I want to explore. Like for me, I want to play Tomb Raider and do I don't care. The combat I care much less about than like solving the tombs.
Then this is perfect. Turn all of it off, Keith, because there's a character which is the central location of this story. It's called The Oldest House. And it's basically this old building in New York that unless you are looking for it, you don't see it. And all kinds of crazy ish is hidden in there. Paranormal stuff, all the like ghost. I don't want to give anything away. You're going to, I promise you will at least get 10 good hours out of it.
All right.
Yeah, you get a little bit of serious Men in Black, a little bit of low key with the time variant, agency, and definitely some dark elements in the development of who the people within the agency are.
Yeah, and who's really running the show. It's really good. It's well done.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay, but really what I want to talk about is this documentary that has been out for a little while now. It's currently available on Hulu. And also, I believe you can purchase it on Amazon Prime. And it's a National Geographic documentary called The Mission. And I've been putting off watching this one for a very specific reason. Let me tell you what it's about, broad topic. It's about John Allen Chow, who was a Christian missionary who went to the North Sentinelese Island to preach the gospel and was killed by the North Sentinelese. His body was never recovered, and it's about that. So I was a little bit skeptical going in. I put it off because for me, generally, I enjoy documentaries because the ones I like are played pretty straight. They don't editorialize too much. They don't take a position as much. And I generally scoff at ones that do. I felt that there's no way you could present this very much grizzly man type story without being on one side or the other. Either he was a missionary trying to do God's work and was killed, or an idiot who was sticking his face where it shouldn't be and paid the consequences. I can imagine what our general opinions are on this show. Mm-hmm. I also thought, with my very strong opinion of the latter of these two options, that I was not going to enjoy it, even if they took my side, right? I'm just way too biased to think this is going to be a story. Also, there's no footage of this. So how are you going to compel me for 90 minutes? I also like first-person documentary evidence. But I watched it anyway, because it's National Geographic. and the biggest success of this film is that it, in my opinion, pretty much 90% solves all of the problems I had. It does present it pretty much down the middle. And it does that instead of finding people who are on extremes of either position. It found a lot of very rational, well-spoken folks who are sort of in between, right? And I'll give you two examples to explain my point. One is a man who was a missionary who went to another very similar type island and lived with the native people for, I believe it was 15 to 20 years he lived there, and learned their language, learned their culture, did not got their respect enough for them not to kill him and just kind of let him be, only to have it utterly fail and have them utterly reject his religion. And so he was one of the people discussing this event. And I thought, well, damn, I'll take that guy's opinion, right? Because his faith has been challenged, his anthropological methods were challenged, and he had to sort of wrestle with the consequences of failing instead of kind of getting the easy answer of instantly being killed and being martyrized by his people and so never really having to wrestle with. So this guy's a great example. And also, some of the people who actually helped this gentleman, John, plan his plan. And they have to wrestle with him, knowing him as a person and how he was impulsive in some ways and how he was very much a really good human being trying to do good work for folks and not blur that with just his very... And so they discuss things like the God complex. They discuss things like anthropologically, are you actually finding any scientific principles, and religiously, is this the right thing to do? What is a calling? What is the good news? And is this really what God wants, or are you having an ego trip? All of these kind of difficult things are discussed. Nothing's particularly solved, but that's okay with me, right? You can't solve. Sometimes things aren't to be solved; they're just to be analyzed and discussed. And I think there are a lot of esoteric, fundamental, even spiritual things that this presents to you that I think are worthy of contemplation. Also, National Geographic, who produced the film, accepts and lets them discuss some of the blame they might hold from early days. Like, think about National Geographic. It's very imperialistic, and how we, the West, with our photography and our need for science and to spread technology and our Westernness to the other peoples, stick our face in and perpetuate this type of okayness of it. And they own some of that. And I think that's really interesting. So all in all, 90 minutes, well served. Really highly recommend the mission, especially if you like to be challenged. I really found myself more fascinated and invested intellectually than I thought it was even possible. So highly recommend the mission on Hulu.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess it is possible to have imperialistic science, imperialistic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, as a living in America, living in the West, and as we continue to understand more and more and more, all of the insidious ways that we take over the world, even if it's not even designed to be that way. We're not trying to take over, but we are kind of insidious as well, even with our best intentions.
Yeah, and I mean, and one thing that's instantly challenged is, it's maybe even if you allow yourself to believe it's altruistic to say that, if you truly believe that this good news that you have, right, the gospel or whatnot, your religion, your beliefs, it's that these people will go to hell, like, without hearing it, and you were the only person who's brave enough to take it to them. Now, regardless of the ego and all that, let's just say, like, take it at face value. That's making the huge assumption, scientifically, that they give a shit. Right?
It also makes the giant leap that you're not a crazy person.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
Because, like, if you have schizophrenia and I genuinely believe there's an alien inside your body, I need to get it out right this very minute. My good intentions do not help the fact that I just took your liver out.
Well, and one thing I never thought about is if you boil it down, right, to just the simple, even if you are fundamental in your belief that the good news is all that matters, right? This gospel is all that matters. Then you are also fundamentalist enough to believe that the number one goal, the commandment, you shall treat others as you want to be treated. So forcing your ideas, beliefs, and like disease germs onto these other people is in direct conflict with that.
Well, no, because you were raised in a society that did that to you. You did want that.
Yeah. So
Like,
all of these things are discussed.
You go to your faith every week to reinforce that very idea.
Right, and especially if you then can easily create rules to say that like being dying is if that's that, then that's that. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack with this documentary. Definitely worth a watch. I highly recommend. I really enjoyed it. Also, okay.
It might also, having seen it myself, Mike, it also probably behooves the viewer to look up the story beforehand, because you won't find an objective article that tries to present it down the middle. You find one or the other.
Yeah.
It's either he was insane or he was doing God's work. And it's presented so differently that in this actual documentary, the fact that they do kind of thread the needle was fascinating, because in my mind, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, there's no way you can objectively approach this story. You've got to take one side or the other. And the fact that they didn't, essentially, and wound up bringing up bigger moral questions along the way about themselves, that's a National Geographic. Really, really, really good.
Yeah, I'll just mention the other point I forgot to bring up. So John, they never recovered his body, but they did recover his journal, and his parents allowed the public release of his journal so that they could use his words.
That's interesting.
To kind of try to give us his brain space. And they had really good actors reading both his journal and some letters that his father had written, because his dad was very much anti-fundamentalist and was kind of not at war, but in conflict with his son about this thing that he knew was illegal and he knew was very wrong to do in some ways, but was trying to find moral justification for it. Really, really interesting exploration. Okay, lastly, I just wanted to spend our last few minutes here. Sometimes we'll talk about Weekly Rad, but this week I want to talk about something I've been thinking about, Nick, as listening to some of your colleagues talk at work. We're going into this election cycle. Now their sort of nominees are sort of set in stone, and it's going to be scary. Keith and I talked about really a lot of the scary challenges we're going to be reckoning with with AI, with the ability of deep faking, and just to learn what fact is and present fact. But I wanted to talk with you specifically, Nick, because at a very top level, of course, but as an educator in schools dealing with youth whose technological acuity is just growing rapidly, well beyond we're smart enough to police, right? I'm interested as to what you've seen with AI and with technology in school. What are the biggest battles you're waging, and what are the biggest ways in which it's maybe helped? I just want to kind of open the door to a conversation we don't talk about a lot. Is like, yeah, we're talking about how it's going to affect us, our jobs, our politics, but how is it affecting the kids, outside of just like cyberbullying, right? I'm sure that's a big part of it.
Cyberbullying in terms of like the artificial intelligence hasn't really become prevalent in any way yet. I'm sure it will once there's more easy access to, the deep fakes and pictures, music, and creating videos and all that kind of nonsense. Where we're finding the conversation right now, it's more of an existential crisis, right? When something like this first comes up and people start hearing about it before you actually see it, the question is, well, the kids are going to use this to cheat. And then how do we prevent the use of it, right? That's always the first thing. How do we ban it? How do we make sure it doesn't kind of infiltrate and sneak in? Then as a district, less than 2 years ago, they banned all of it, right? You couldn't access ChatGPT. You couldn't get Cactus. Magic School, any of the different AI platforms that are starting to become bigger, just boom, off the table, off limits. Well, you can't do that to the kids. They find a way around all that, right? They figure it out anyway. So eventually you kind of get to the acceptance phase. And when people finally started realizing that this wasn't going away, it's like, okay, so what do we do next? So at our school, our goal was to show our staff, here's how you can use artificial intelligence. Here's how it can make your job easier. Here's how it can make your life easier. And we presented one product in particular. We presented Magic School to them, which is still free. You can buy a pro user license, and they also have institutional licenses and things like that too. but a couple of my teachers presented in the ways that it's made their lesson planning easier, connecting standards to objectives, and coming up with cool ideas easier. Some of our teachers have figured out a way to utilize the generative piece of the artificial intelligence to actually grade papers. And what they have found, which, when we go back to that God complex, is that AI grades papers and offers better feedback than human beings do. So if you have to grade 135 essays of all the kids in all your classes, and you know that a computer can do it better and give them better feedback, well, are you going to take the time to grade the 135 essays yourself, or are you going to take the time to do the input necessary to create the generative output for the AI to do it? Our teachers are grappling with that right now, and having a hard time.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's hard to say something else can do it better. I've used it ad nauseum lately in terms of when I'm having trouble sending an email response to a parent, or conveying the tone that I want in a message to the entire school community. I have learned that if I spend enough time with the AI, telling it exactly what I want, going for the exact tone, having it regenerate and regenerate and regenerate, I'm getting a much better final product than I will get from just my own self or having my friends revise it, edit it, etc. And that's where it really boils down to, in that the 4 skills we want kids to come out of school with and go into the real world with are the skills that 21st century's employers are looking for, right? So we know that those are communication, the ability to collaborate, critical thinking skills, and creative problem solving. Those are the things that we need our children to be able to do. So if we can use artificial intelligence to help develop those skills, it becomes a powerful tool to do that. And we're working on a philosophy and a protocol right now to develop our building philosophy around that. So we basically kind of took a lot of the pillars of our school district's mission statements and values, along with our own middle school values. And I've assembled a committee to look over a draft that we've put together, and we're going to edit it. We're going to revise it until we get to kind of the place we want to overall be using it. And those things focus on educational integrity, student engagement, and engagement is much different than compliance. Compliance is what most good kids do anyway, by just doing school. Engagement is actually engaging with the teaching and the learning and being part of the process there. As we said, skill development with AI. How do you use it well? How do you use it powerfully? Empowering critical thinking. So using the artificial intelligence tools to help us think deeper, essentially. And finally, using it for ethical use, for ethical reasons, Mike, to prevent the cyberbullying and things that we were talking about there. So it gets deep quick. Some teachers would prefer to just kind of like leave it alone and for lack of a better term, let's just kind of bury our heads and wait for someone else to tell us. But our opinion overall, I think bigger picture for the people who see where we're headed 5-10 years down the road, which 10 years down the road will be the end of my career, is that we shouldn't really ignore this. We should get on board and figure out how to make it valuable, essentially.
That's fascinating. And I hadn't really, not having kids and not being in the school world, I haven't really thought through all of that, but that makes a great deal of sense. And I think what you're describing is the best use of it is collaboration with it, as opposed to using it for you or denying it, and I think that is like any other tool. I remember when I was in high school or middle school, probably middle school early, because nobody had the internet. The internet was as verboten to use for your stuff as AI. It's like, oh, you got to have a real source or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying, and you're right. Working with knowledge and the type of things that it does, or not working with it, right, is going to be as pointless as teaching cursive. Back in it's just like, okay, that is how we used to do it. That is no longer relevant to your life. And if we're going to actually try to teach you something, as opposed to like check boxes on a curriculum, this is going to be your life. We have to teach you how to work with this. I mean, it's the same thing. I argued with the teachers when I was growing up, like, guys, you need to be teaching us computers. This school doesn't even have computers that are contemporary. You're not setting us up for what we're going to be using in our life. And I love how forward thinking what you're describing in your curriculum.
Well, and that takes a lot of courage too. A brief anecdote I'll share is my brother and I were at dinner, right? And he was telling an anecdote about a parent trying to pull one over on him, right? And just because of actual literal ignorance, I was then able to kind of tell him that, like, oh, wait, there is that technology that she was describing that you thought was BS is actually real. And then you have to then go to phase 2 after acceptance, which is, okay, so can I implement this? And I'll let you tell the story real quick, Nick.
You actually tell it better because of your understanding of the technology. But the long and the short of it was they wanted their child to be able to be allowed to wear AirPods all day, which all students would love to do, most of them for the reason of tuning out their teachers, right? However, the argument the parent was making was, no, you can use the AirPods to filter out other noise and only hear the teaching that's going on. And immediately, I was like, no, you can't do that. And then when I bring this up at the conversation at dinner with Mike, and my 2 daughters were there, Mike's like, well, actually, depending on the type of AirPod you have and whatnot, that technology does exist and can do some of that. And when we brought this information back to the school team and started talking about the type of accommodations we make in individualized education plans and 504 agreements and things, our heads started to explode a little bit because we realized, oh man, this is another level we're reaching in terms of how do we know? How can we know if the kids are using it the right way? And once again, no different than AI, it becomes we have to teach them to use it the right way. And then down the road, eventually, when we free them, that we hope they make the right decisions, which becomes a big part of that there, Mike.
I mean, like acceptance, right? You keep saying acceptance. And I think that really is the reality. And the problem is, because this is, the technological advancements are happening exponentially, we don't have 5 or 10 years to transition to, like, okay, internet is a source you can use, right? These things are happening so fast. You have to also accept that you're not going to be able to keep up, that you're constantly going to have to be learning and taking in new information, and just like, it's going to come at you faster than you can handle it. You got to try to keep up.
Well, it's even more dastardly than that, Keith. I work in edtech. Okay, I work for one of the biggest edtech companies that is around right now, and even with all of the resources and amazingly genius developers and creative thinkers in the biz, we've actually had to slow down advancements in technology because the education system moves at such a glacial pace. And so if you're advancing too rapidly, you're creating products that they can't, you're still trying to get them to phase 1. So it's interesting that but technology still increases and kids access and usage.
Oh, they're ahead of us.
Yeah. So it's actually really interesting to see it from that perspective. And additionally, I'll say for schools, for parents out there, look, I know that fighting for your children and championing your children is paramount. I understand that. But when you really see it from these different perspectives, schools are never moving fast enough. They're never funded enough, even the good ones. And so the people actually, at the end of the day, making the decisions, trying to actually live up to the idea that it is about every student every day, and you're trying to create individualized learning for every student. You know who's really in charge of that? It's the boots on the ground. It's the teachers. It's the principals in the building. Yeah. So going to your school meetings and just bitching and complaining about what books are in the library is not the best use of your time, right? It's
a waste of your time and energy, and it also, like, especially with like the book stuff, you're not operating from a place of good faith. You're just grinding your wheels for your attention. However, I think what this all says to me, right, is that what we need to be teaching is literacy, meaning
digital literacy.
Digital literacy. It's the same thing whether it's technological literacy, whether it is informational literacy, like the news, right? You're going to get bombarded with 10 trillion sources of news, some of which specious, some of which legit, some of which halfway in between. Teaching the skills of how do I interpret all of these things? How do I call balls and strikes on what is reputable, what is not, what is ethical, what is not, what is usable, what is not, whether it's technological literacy, media literacy, financial literacy. You have to give the people the tools to teach themselves and call balls and strikes on what's coming at them, more than keeping up with exactly what the thing is, the blinky light of the time. How do I take in this, and how can I use new shit as it comes up? I think that's that would be my I'm not a teacher. I write musicals, but
no,
I think
you nailed it, Keith. You nailed it. And a lot of the big universities, right, all of which, just like a lot of K-12 public education and private education, who were using these AI detectors to determine when kids were cheating, they've now realized, because the research is starting to come out and show, that they're getting it wrong. And they're getting it wrong a giant proportion of the time, and they've disabled now the use of all these AI detectors. So even the universities and the colleges are accepting that, we got to get on board and figure out a different way.
Well, and in real life, as we move forward into this new world, is it even cheating? That is that is like when you go to work, they want you to accomplish the task. It's not about, did you write that paragraph, or is this paragraph usable for the thing that we're trying to accomplish?
No different, in my opinion, than robotic limbs, robotic arms, etc. Right? If someone has a disability or cancer, we look to find a way to treat the disability, to treat the disease. Right. Well,
but as exactly you're talking about, it's how do you collaborate with that to make that exactly the paragraph that you want? How do you make it the most, the most useful information with all? And so it's just like typing on the computer and using spell check. Remember we used to have the debate about whether spell check was cheating, and now it's like what? I mean, of course, just freaking use it. Like, wired. And that's, I think we're headed there.
Ironically, we started this. I'll end it with talking about politics, because we're entering a year where all these conversations are moot, because nothing will get talked about or discussed that legitimately, from what Keith said, a place of good faith, until hopefully maybe after the election. But what's so funny is that even if this is an incredible election with huge turnout, let's hope, we can only hope, right? Even if that, it will be this much of the country that votes, right? Little bitty sliver. All it would do is some actual Congress coming together and giving some infrastructure money to find a way. Because guess what? If you could vote on your browser, guess how much? 90% of people would vote. Yeah. And we could have legitimate leaders elected legitimately. Yes. Would there be challenges? Yeah. Yes. Of course there would be challenges. But if it's that, or just like hope the old people roll their wheelchairs there's no compliance. There's no individualized plans for voting, which is one of the most important things we can do. So it's ironic that as fast as our technology is increasing, we can't even figure it out.
Well, and informed voting, which is a whole nother ball game altogether. I mean, I think that's where we're sort of in this dystopian election right now, because our information system has been so undermined and poisoned intentionally over the last 40 years, has gotten to the point where there isn't anybody calling balls and strikes on what's real and what's not, what's true and what's not. We've systematically and intentionally undermined the very concept of truth.
Well, Keith,
and so
hopefully there are arbiters like Dr. Nick out there in your kid's school, even if we don't have kids, that are creating those arbiters.
Dr. Nick, fix it.
I hear that all the time. All the time.
Folks, Geekly is back. So until we talk next time, that reverb was important. That's how big this is. Make sure you subscribe to the new channel. Tell a friend. Help us out. We're going to have all kinds of crazy stuff on this channel, so get ready. Until next time, keep on geeking on.